What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tirfon Orbital. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes and go over an install that I recently completed. This was a custom install on a Pach Store or Ultimate Works Dark Wanderer. So this is not the first time I've done an upgrade or an overhaul on an Ultimate Works hilt. So I do want to talk a little bit about what that process looked like for this particular hilt. Removing the pre-kit from Ultimate Works hilts is not always easy. I've had hilts in the past where getting the pre-kit out of there is a little bit easy because of there's set screws that are visible. Pach Store, Ultimate Works do a great job at hiding the set screws that secure these pre-kits in place. Now, if you're not aware, Pach Store, Ultimate Works, they offer the majority of their factory installs come with what they call their cores, right? So their cores are essentially just a chassis with a proprietary pin system that you can swap in and out of different sabers. And it's a great solution for folks that want to have an extensive collection of hilts and just have one chassis, right? It's a great solution for that. Every time that I have had Ultimate Works or Pach Store hilts in my hand, they've always felt great. They're really well made. And again, like their chassis system is a great system. However, like if you find a hilt used on the marketplace, a Pach hilt that already has the pre-kit installed and you want a custom chassis, what the installer has to do is remove that pre-kit. Now, like I said, some of these hilts, the Pach Store does a great job at hiding the screws that secure these pre-kits in place. The OWP that I did a couple of months ago was super easy, right? I could remove the shroud. Underneath that outer shroud, there were set screws that held the pre-kit in place, so that came out really easily. With this particular hilt, unfortunately, getting the pre-kit out was difficult. I feel like Pach and Ultimate Works probably used thread locker on some of the set screws that hold these parts in place. And that's, for a couple of reasons, I assume, right? One being they don't want the screws to come loose in shipping, but also I assume that they don't want people to remove these pre-kits. I assume that they just need them in place. However, they have to be removable. If they weren't, Pach and Ultimate Works would not be able to perform repairs on hilts, right? So they're removable, but sometimes they're a little bit more difficult. And again, with this hilt, it was difficult getting the pre-kit out. In fact, I ended up having to, damage the existing pre-kit to get it out of this hilt, right? And not only that, but the client did want this hilt weathered. So the process looked a little bit different, right? So I already had this hilt in hand with the pre-kit. I removed the pre-kit. The hilt was then sent to Austin over at Astoria Workshop, where he did his magic on the hilt, and then it came back to me for an install. So it's been moved around a little bit, but the final product is really, really great. I think Austin did an awesome job on this hilt. It looks gnarly and used and rad, and then I just put my chassis in it. So anyway, there's the backstory on Pach Ultimate Works hilts. I love their hilts. I do. I think they're fantastic, especially if you're just, an everyday collector who wants, a Canon hilt that you only have to buy one core for. They're a great solution for that. So yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the install, right? So we're going to come into Fusion first. This is the chassis that I designed for this install. So with this particular hilt, there was not a lot of room in the grip, okay? So to alleviate some of that, I have the Proffie board kicked at an angle, but it also, like this upper third of the chassis slides up inside of the body of the hilt. And we'll see that on the up and close in a second. But I did do, I was able to fit some greebly work on this guy. I also have 2 channels along each side of the hilt, one there and one here, for red Edison filament bulbs. So those are solid, they're rigid type. I've found that there are 2 types of these Edison tubes, right? One is a flexible tube and the other is a rigid. I feel like the flexible tubes are a great, they're very versatile if you want to use them. However, the LED bulbs themselves on the inside of the flexible ones are easier to see than the rigid ones. The rigid ones, you get one continuous tube of light, whereas with the flexible ones, you can still see each bulb. Right? It's very, very minimal very minimal to notice it, but yeah, I prefer the rigid ones. They're harder to work with, but I prefer the light that they emit, right? So that's 2 of those on each side of the hilt. Our battery tray is here. Along the bottom, we have a 24 millimeter speaker from Smuggler's Outpost. And again, the Proffie is kicked at an angle and just slides up under here, right? Nice and easy. It is a static chassis. So let's come up top and take a look at the hilt, right? So here's the hilt. This was weathered by Austin at Astoria Workshop. I think he did a rad job on this hilt. It looks fantastic. So this entire hilt was just shiny brass. It's a full, this is a full brass upper assembly. I'm sorry, no. So it's a brass shroud around an aluminum core. The pommel is solid brass. So it does give a lot of nice weight to the hilt. I mean, he did some really nice rust in this grenade section grip. It looks so rad to me. A lot of like some battle scarring here. He did add this cloth. It just looks really cool. It looks a lot better than the original one. Not that the original one didn't look good as well, but I think it looks so much better weathered like this, right? So I'm going to talk about the Pach hilt, or Ultimate Works hilts. If you purchased this hilt stock, it would have a pre-kit. The pre-kit sat somewhere in here, if I recall correctly, right? So I knew that this was an outer brass assembly, and I knew that underneath that were the screws that held the pre-kit in place. Typically, it's 2 screws, upper and a lower, that hold the pre-kit in place. To get to those, I knew that I had to take this outer shroud off. So there are 2 screws for these forks. I have a feeling that those screws are what hold this outer shroud in place. 2 of these screws were stripped, and the other ones I could not even remove. So that's why I had to get a little creative with removing the pre-kit in this guy, and I did end up damaging it upon removal. Not that I needed to salvage it anyway, but I always prefer when I can get the pre-kit out as one piece, because then I can reuse the set screws for my own PCBs if need be, right? So underneath, it's a single button setup. Underneath this switch assembly, there is a red tactile switch. There is a set screw around back. This does hold the chassis in place. And I think that's all, right? We do have a lit PCB connector down in there. So let's talk about how to use this guy. The grip does unscrew in 2 places. You can unscrew it here, and you can unscrew it here. For the purposes of this install, you only need to unscrew from the waist section, right? And there is the chassis. So you can kind of see the Proffie here. Proffie does sit at an angle up in this area, so you can still get at it with a USB or pull out your SD card if need be. I did do like a copper bronze rub and buff on this chassis just to try and make it look a little in line with the rest of the hilt. There are those Edison tubes, and that's it, right? So let's pop a battery in this guy. So spring side is your negative. Take the flat part of your battery, put it in your battery tray. So this setup does not have a kill switch. You are the kill switch when you put the battery in. This has been installed with the Proffie V3, the newest version of Proffie board. And according to the developers, this has already been set up with the new deep sleep. And I did write that into the config. So after 5 minutes of inactivity, this will go to sleep. I think that's going to be a game changer for the new Proffie boards. That deep sleep is something that we've all been really hoping for, right? A deep sleep doesn't have parasitic drain. So there's a little bit of shine through in the grip with those Edison filaments. And so once you get your battery in, you're ready to go. It's coming out of the bottom here. So I did notice, while this pommel is a very beautiful pommel, does hinder sound a little bit. So it sounds a lot louder, obviously, with the pommel off. But yeah, it was just something that I noticed about the Hilt. Twist to activate, twist to deactivate is on. To the client, I did put the refonts that you requested are on this config, as well as some extra ones that I added. I believe this is one that you requested, Dolby. Interesting sound file, never heard that before. So, single button setup. To scroll through your fonts, you want to long press and release. To go forward in your fonts, you point the hilt down, long press and release. Let's go back to that PlayStation. I feel like it's a PlayStation font. I don't know, it's called Dolby. So anyhow, let's put a blade in it. All right, so this is a 1-inch blade holder. You want to set your blade down in there so it's resting on those PCB pins. There is a set screw around back, or the front, depending on what you consider the back and the front. There is a set screw back here, so you want to screw that in once your blade is in place. What I do like about this hilt too is there's a window here for some shine through, right? Got to get a shorter demo blade before I break stuff. Yeah, it's a really nice feeling hilt. It's super hefty. Feels heavy as shit. Yeah, I really like the full brass. It feels heavy. You know, I like heavy hilts. So that's it. Let's do one more.
Ascension.
So to the client, you did suggest or request just the 2 fonts, but I did put some others on there just to switch it up. The config is on the SD or on the SD card, a backup of the config if need be. But that's it, right? So I just wanted to go over a little bit on what upgrading Pach Store / Ultimate Works hilts looks like. It's possible, right? It's just not always easy. And unfortunately with this one, like I said, I ended up damaging the prekit. Not that we wanted to keep it in place anyhow, but it's just not always easy. You've got to figure out how they've hidden. They do a really great job at hiding their set screws for those prekits. So anyhow, that's it. Thank you very much to the client for your patience. Thank you very much to the viewers, for everybody for watching and the support. If anyone has any questions about this particular install, please don't be a stranger. Let me know, reach out. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Thanks for watching, everybody.